Most people think procrastination is some form of a discipline problem, or that it's their identity. For example, I'm a procrastinator, or I just procrastinate in this area, or this is something that I do. But I don't think it is. I think from experience, procrastination is often a psychological weight problem. So what do I mean? What do I mean by that? Like something has become mentally heavy in a way that probably is unconscious. It's weighing down on people. And interestingly, the way most people try to solve procrastination actually makes it worse. It makes it heavier. So they analyze it, they overthink it, they ask questions like these, like, why am I like this? What's wrong with me? Why can't I just do it? Or why do I always procrastinate in this situation or with this particular area? And I'm not saying that a bit of reflection or questioning doesn't help, but most of the time, those kind of questions pull people into a very unconstructive loop of thinking. It actually restricts movement. It restricts action. It's a loop of self-analysis. And before long, they're no longer engaging with the task itself. They're engaging with what the task means about them. And they're usually doing it unwittingly. It's usually unconscious. They think it's the right way to go, but it's not. And it's a very different psychological experience for the person as a result. It's actually not healthy. It's not going to feel good. And I think it's one of the biggest reasons, hidden reasons, why people stay stuck. Now, there's a phrase that I use a lot with clients over the years. And if you know me well, you won't be surprised with this statement. It's clarity is power. And for me, that is very true. You know, having clarity of vision, having clarity of direction, having clarity of my priorities, having clarity of mind. But what I've also realized over the years is that, you know, when I use the word clarity, it means different things to different peoples. It's the power of a word when it comes to the human mind. And just because I say one word doesn't mean that you're going to hear it the way that I mean it. And I think there's a simple distinction that has changed a lot for me over the years in terms of what clarity actually means. Because I think for a lot of people, they assume that clarity creates movement. So they'll often wait kind of to feel ready, to feel more confident, to have more certainty, to wait to feel until they're inspired before they take action, to kind of feel like just mentally I'm prepared. But in reality, I think life works the opposite way. The way life seems to work at its best is that movement creates clarity. Taking action creates more clarity. And that's a radically different understanding of positive change. Because once people ask, in the context of procrastination, if they ask, why am I not doing this? They often then disappear into an identity thinking trap, which will bring you to this loop of statements or questions, statements like, I'm just lazy, or I'm inconsistent, or oh God, I never follow through, or maybe I'm just not disciplined or cut out for this. And so the mind starts circling self-image, particularly if the mood drops. And of course, these kind of questions can very often create conditions for your mood to drop. So when your mind starts to circle self-image, it doesn't really allow space for clarity around the next practical action, the next practical step. And identity conversations with yourself are incredibly sticky. They're very subtle. They're usually unconscious and they will seem logical, but they cause problems. You know, and then a simple action then could be quite simple in front of you to do, but it becomes psychologically loaded and people procrastinate. So now it's no longer, let me just do the thing. Now it becomes, what does the fact that I haven't done the thing say about me? And that creates psychological heaviness. And any sort of heaviness in that context slows movement. It hinders momentum. But the moment your attention shifts towards a question like this one, how do I begin? Like, what's one small step right now? Everything changes. The mind stops analyzing identity. It starts searching for movement, for action. And that's a very different direction psychologically. It's a very different feeling. Now think about something for yourself that you've been putting off. Maybe, let me think of a few examples. Maybe it's a difficult conversation. Maybe it's taking action on something seemingly impossible or difficult. Maybe it's just improving your health or starting a creative project. Or maybe it's just making a decision. Now, it's an area that you've been putting off. So just notice what usually happens. Most people may, they'll be thinking about the entire thing. They'll be overthinking it. They'll be thinking about the difficulty, the uncertainty, maybe even the possible failure. And so the task grows psychologically bigger and bigger, and it gets heavier. But something really fascinating happens when we allow ourselves to just take one small, tiny little step. I'm going to send the email, make the call, I'm going to arrange to meet someone. I'm going to go for the walk. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to write the first paragraph. All of a sudden, the feeling around that particular activity changes. It feels different. And not because the whole problem has disappeared, but because taking a tiny movement has changed our experience of the activity. Now, I've seen this repeatedly with myself over my lifetime. I've seen it definitely with clients over the years that, somebody can spend months trying to understand why they can't improve something. Could be their business or their leadership or their state of mind or their health. Maybe they research, they plan, they analyze, they talk to people. And without realizing it, very often they're trying to solve themselves psychologically first. How do I just get started here? How do I kind of get around my inner voice? I remember talking to somebody on a workshop that attended my Mindshift workshop a few years ago. And one of the questions, and it's quite common, is, yeah, look, I want to get up earlier to kind of maybe do some exercise, but my inner voice keeps telling me not to get up. Like, what do you suggest? And they were looking at me like, when I said the answer, I said, listen, this is going to be so simple. Just get up the first morning. Even if your inner voice is saying, don't get up, just make yourself get up. You can do that. And then do it the next morning and do it the next morning. What you'll find is you start to get momentum. And that's what they did. So for example, with them, they wanted to get up and walk every morning to start helping their health and their mind. So, when I talked to them 2 weeks after that conversation, they were like in shock because I said, I just got up. And I said, I'm going to go for a walk for 20 minutes. And the first morning they said their inner voice was just hammering them. What are you doing? Don't get up. And then when they got up, don't walk. This isn't going to make any difference. But after a few days of doing it, something had shifted. And it wasn't because they'd fully resolved all their mental issues and the inner voice. It wasn't because they changed their mental commentary, the inner voice's narration, or it wasn't because of positive thinking. It was because they took action and they just created movement. And the movement itself, over time, after about 7 days, it changed their thinking. Public speaking could be another good example. Most people have a lot of fear around speaking in public. And a lot of people believe that they need to have more confidence before they begin speaking. But most experienced speakers know that the opposite is true, that often the clarity and the confidence that you're looking for arrives from doing the speaking. So you allow yourself, like the best speakers I know, just got started. They allowed themselves to feel uncertain. They allowed themselves to perform badly. They allowed themselves to just get going even when they felt like crap or they realized they weren't doing a good job. And then gradually, through persistence, something starts organizing itself through movement, through action. Maybe an analogy that comes to mind is, think about a huge ship. To get moving requires a huge amount of energy initially. But once momentum builds, the movement itself starts helping the ship move. It becomes easier. And I think human beings are very similar. We assume that motivation creates action. We need to be a certain way or be ready. But often, really, if you look at where you create results and momentum, it's action creates motivation. Action creates momentum. And once movement begins, well, then momentum starts carrying a lot of the psychological weight for you. So, as I usually do here, let me bring it back to you with some questions. But just before I do that, if you want to go deeper on some of the topics that I cover in the podcast, increasingly the platform that I'm using is Substack, where I just take a topic like this and I go even deeper than what I'm doing here on the podcast. And I kind of very often, increasingly going to be bringing in worksheets and some video and things like that. If you're interested, check me out on Substack. It's in the show notes. So the 3 questions I'm going to give you, right? what are you currently delaying or procrastinating on because you believe you need to feel more ready first or more confident or have more clarity? Like, where are you delaying? And then when you think about that area, be honest, look at it objectively and say, well, okay, where has self analysis quietly replaced movement or action, like the simplest action? And in that context, what would become easier if you stopped asking a question in the area, something like, why am I stuck? Why can't I take action here? And instead, just forget the question and ask this question. Okay, what's the next visible step that I can take here? So you might not have the complete picture. There might be fog beyond the next step, but you probably can see one small step to take. So what is that step? And then do it. It's remarkably powerful and remarkably simple. And I suppose there's lots of different angles I could take off this. I'm sure you may even have questions. But I think one of the key points I'm trying to make here is that you don't need to solve yourself before you begin anything. You don't need to have perfect clarity before you take action. Usually what happens is clarity appears because movement begins. And then once you get momentum, what once might have felt psychologically heavy or troublesome often becomes surprisingly workable. And I think usually in my experience, the breakthrough that we're often looking for doesn't come from deeper analysis or overthinking. Usually it comes from just simply beginning. That life in its whole, because this area is not just about business and sport or whatever. This is about your overall life, this level of procrastination. But life becomes much lighter when you realize that you don't need to solve yourself before you begin anything. That's it for this week. Ciao for now.